Hello, welcome to this video. We seem to be moving along in terms of the video schedule, and thank you so much for continuing to watch these short videos. Word of warning, caution, this particular video may be a little bit wordy in terms of content and referencing material, processes that maybe you haven't been exposed to before, and that's okay. Don't try to remember all this material, all this stuff and processes and documents and things like that. What we really want to do is make you familiar, expose this information to you, so you will have a better frame of reference during the training online, this virtual with Amanda and Stacy, who will be helping you with the training. That's really important. So, and a lot of this material will make much more sense to you, and you'll be able to connect the dots as you grow, as you implement YPE, as you learn from your colleagues and your supervisors, and go through additional training, and spend more time in the prevention field within North Carolina. These interconnected stars will begin to align just a tad bit better. So please let me take this opportunity to encourage you and to say, let's just relax a little bit and try to absorb everything you can, but at the same time, not let that stress kind of be between you and me and the content and so forth, because it's a lot. What is youth prevention education? And for our purposes, you know, it's education for youth and parents aimed at decreasing ATOD, that's alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, use by youth by increasing refusal resistance skills and increasing parental communication and monitoring. Increasing, that is. So we really want to increase those protective factors. We want to increase the protective factors with youth. We want to increase parental communication and monitoring of their children as well. We want to decrease some of those risk factors we talked about. Remember those? And increase those protective factors at the same time. It's really super important that we do that. What substances are usually addressed in these youth prevention education programs? Generally, it's all substances. Sometimes that's not true, but generally speaking, it is. But I can't say that's 100% true because some curriculums do a better job than others in addressing certain substances that's being used. Like Catch My Breath, for example, is super focused on tobacco or vaping use, and doesn't necessarily concentrate as much on other substances such as alcohol or other drugs. But other curriculums like life skills, for example, life skills being one of the, some of the original research was created many years ago from the authors of life skills that YPE programs have basically built their research on and their programs on, along with other research over the years. So, all programs are not created equal that we are approved to implement inside the state, but many are very good, but most have a really generic approach. So that allows us some level of flexibility with our use. With YPE, we'll talk a lot about what YPE is. We will talk a lot about effective practices in the community, implementing YPE and serving our students in the classroom or community setting. We will talk a lot about audits and entering data and so forth. One of the most important things we can do is building our capacity organizationally to make sure that we can deliver on the promises we make to our organizations, our communities, but especially our students. And do we have the capacity to do what we said we would do? Do we have the capacity? If we went out there to a local school or community group and we promised to implement Too Good for Drugs, for example, do we really have the financial and human and other resources to make that happen? It's really important that we do, because the last thing we want to do is not follow through. Do we have the individual capacity to be successful? That's why we have a pretty structured YPE training program. That's why we say, if your curriculum program, like life skills or Too Good for Drugs, if those programs require training, that you actually complete training from the curriculum providers before you implement the program. If you're not sure what all that means, reach out to us at the TTA Center. Reach out to your supervisors, and we'll be happy to help you along in the process. That's why we exist. So let's think about capacity. When we talk about capacity in prevention at large, but especially with YPE programs, youth prevention education programs, we talk about physical. Do we have the funding to support the program? We also have human capacity. Have you been trained in YPE standards? Have you been trained in the curriculum? Do you have the necessary support to be successful? These are all questions we need to be asking yourselves. Does your organization have the resources, the infrastructure, the relationships to implement programs such as this? And outside of your agency, the organizational capacity is generally your internal capacity, sometimes external, but look within yourself. Does your agency have experience? Do you have the level of confidence, resources necessary to be successful? The infrastructure, the policies, the protections against liability and so forth, and general capacity considerations. Support. Do you have local support from organizations, from school settings, from other groups to actually reach youth, to provide this service? Do those supporting community agencies understand that youth prevention education usually occurs over a longer period of time, and it requires a level of investment and time and support and hopefulness? We talk a lot about planning in prevention. Do we have a really good plan to achieve the goals that we want to achieve? Your plans for youth prevention education, generally, the prevention provider must receive approval from the state for each curriculum they want to implement. Now, we do have a pre-approved list. So if your needs assessment data matches the program you want to implement, that's why that pre-approved list exists. So we always want to make sure that the programs we propose on implementing are based on your needs assessment data and the needs of your community. We want to make sure that everybody completes this program, youth prevention education training. What this program, these 10 hours you're spending with us, is based on the foundation. It's the basics. It's the basic foundation. Then the third planning process we really want to make sure is happening is, again, that you've met all requirements to deliver the curriculum as it's designed to be implemented. If the program requires training, you have to get training from the curriculum. We generally pick a curriculum that we train in every year, that we train providers to implement, so we can leverage resources. And if you have staff people who haven't been trained before, you have an opportunity to be trained. For example, in past years, we've trained in Project Toward No Drugs, we've trained in Too Good for Drugs, we've trained in life skills recently. In the spring, a couple of weeks ago, we trained in Catch My Breath and Avoid, AVOID. Both are anti-vaping programs, and all those programs are on the pre-approved list. And we really want to focus on implementing those programs that we have a pre-approval status of, because we know that they have a track record that we believe in. We talk about best practice steps, how we implement these programs, that students participate in the required number of sessions, that if students only participate in, say, 2 of 10 sessions, that's a problem. We usually ask students to participate in 80% of our sessions. That's really, really important for them to get a good feel for the program at large. We want the program to be implemented in the appropriate setting based on the design of the authors of the program, that we're following fidelity. Remember that word from a couple of videos ago? That we're implementing the program based on the way that we said we would, based on best practice. All sessions have to at least be 30 minutes long, at a minimum. The last thing we want to do is pop in, do 2 or 3 lessons on the same day. It takes 20 minutes and say, thank you so much. We'll be back next time. But we're not following best practice. We're not following the research. We know that there's a certain level, a dosage level, that has to occur during the interaction, during that period of time, over a certain period of time, for students to build some momentum, to start trying to make sense of this new information they're being given, and try to make connections between their past experiences, to give these students a chance to practice some of these skills in a safe environment with you and their fellow students, in a non-judgmental environment, so they can also maybe, just maybe, take a risk next time that they're faced with a really challenging environment or a really challenging question, that they have the level of confidence and skills to make the best decision they can make when they're all by themselves sometimes in really tough circumstances and settings. And one of the ways we do that is minimum session length. And number 4, I just mentioned it, that we ask students not to meet, or leaders not to meet, more than 2 times per week. So we need that duration of the dosage. It's very important. It's like taking your medicine. If you go to the doctor, you need to take the appropriate level of the dosage for the appropriate diagnosed medical condition over the appropriate period of time. And if we don't do those things, if we have an illness, we're decreasing the likelihood of success with the treatment regimen. Well, when we deliver RIPE, it's a very similar process, a very, very similar process. We do have some temporary exceptions due to COVID-19. We realize that many of our schools have not been active since March. Many of our schools may be implementing transitional plans for virtual delivery, online delivery, hybrid approaches where there's some face-to-face instruction and online instruction. So we realize that we may not be able to follow some of our standard operating procedures, policies, and practices, but we still want to reach as many students as we can if they're providers and if you have the opportunity. So we have waived some of our major guidance temporarily until we have a better feel and handle on the circumstance related to the pandemic, and while schools are still developing their plans and processes to support students. So I will read this to you. Temporary COVID-19 requirements includes a minimum of 3 sessions, must be completed virtually or in an environment that could shift to virtually if needed. We also must choose an interactive curriculum if at all we can. So basically what that means, you do have permission to reach out to your students, to deliver as much content as you can within 3 sessions in an environment that is safe, based on social distancing standards, based on your community organization standard, based on the school standard and policy, or could be completed virtually as well. Or if you start in person, based on social distancing standards, your program could be transitioned virtually if needed. Also, we're asking providers to choose interactive curriculum if at all possible. That's very, very important. We want them to choose material that encourages communication, interaction, experiential learning, hands-on learning, even in the virtual setting. We at the TTA Center are really, really worried about this. That if you have questions about how to transition your face-to-face training to a online setting, please let us know. We really want to help you. We have some level of expertise in terms of virtual delivery. And in a really short period of time, we believe we can provide maybe some hints and best practices and reduce your level of stress and so forth as best we can. We also are raving, generally, we asked for 80% of youth to complete at least 80% of the lessons. That particular standard is being waived, again, temporarily because of COVID. These are not waivers that will exist forever. They exist due to the current pandemic. So we want you to understand what the general standards are for implementation based on state operating procedure and policies. At the same time, understanding that we have to make some allocations. We want to continue to serve youth as best we can, given the challenges we're facing. And we can't necessarily meet some of those really best practice high standards that we seek to achieve. We have to work within the constraints and the health conditions that we currently have. Evaluation is a really big and important part of everything we do. It's growing in importance, and evaluating our youth prevention education programs are really important as well. One of the ways that we collect data and evaluate programs is in our state tracking database. It's called ECHO. You may enter data into ECHO already, or you might have a selection of staff, agency staff, or supervisors that enter data into ECHO. But I'm sure all of you probably collect or will be collecting certain types of information from your youth and from your class sessions in terms of number of attendance, number of minutes that you met, how many students completed how many sessions, and those type of things. And we need all that type of data to enter into ECHO, which eventually is reported up to SAMHSA, your primary funding source on the federal level for block grant. So having a really good feel about the types of activities being implemented in our communities, how many people's being served, the patterns in the data, and how effective we're being is just really important. And the typical types of data that we collect is location, the location of the YPE delivery, start date, end date, the number of groups or the population type served, how did we deliver the training, how often does this event or this opportunity occur, this training event, the number of groups started. You might teach life skills, for example, and have served 12 separate groups over a 12-month period. The number of groups started and completed, I think I mentioned that, number of sessions, the number of youth completing, and master reach. That's actually just a fancy name to call the number of people that we served. And in YPE, we only count students one time. We don't count them every time they come to group, or not to group, but to your lesson, to your program. So if they come to your program for 10 lessons, we don't count them 10 times, we just count them one time. We ask for supporting documentation too in the ECHO briefcase, such as a letter or email approving for each curriculum that your agency has permission to implement. If it's a program that wasn't pre-approved, that your agency has permission from the state to implement programming if it was not pre-approved, or if the program's not on the pre-approved list. For IPE certificates for staff, as part of the audit process, we asked agencies to document that they went through this program. If you are implementing a program that requires training, formal training, we ask agencies to include on behalf of their staff certificates, like Too Good for Drugs training or life skills training or so forth. We ask for, hello, this is my German Shepherd. Her name is Artemis. Sorry. She's saying hello. We ask for attendance logs in terms of the number of students who attended each session. We don't ask for names. We don't want you to upload any individual identifying information into Echo, but we do need documentation of sessions and number attended. Of course, that leads into number attended, the setting, the length, dates of delivery, if you have schedules or formal plans or so forth. In any event, these are examples of the types of materials that we ask you to implement or to upload into Echo. And that's the very end of this. This is a very long video. My apologies. I do not normally like to share video, and it happened to be true, wasn't it? It was a long video with lots of technical information, and to consider it just an overview, many of these same topics again will be discussed during IPE training. So at least you'll have a basic source of knowledge as we get into those conversations. Again, thank you so much, and until we meet next time.